We are 3 weeks after D-Day. One of the most important double agents for Germany and Britain climbs up into a German Junker Bomber 88 in Soesterberg airfield near Utrecht in Holland. He organizes his strap bags and a suitcase around him and straps himself into a harness in the back of the airplane, whose friendly pilot is a young German fellow not a day older than 21. The flight that this gentleman was supposed to be on, a couple of hours earlier, a Fokker-Wulf plane, was shot down. So now he's in the Junker 88 that's rumbling and rattling, climbing up high into the sky, taking course on the British Isles. May I introduce you to the passenger in question? Double agents Edward Arnold Chapman, alias Eddie, alias Edward, alias Edward Simpson, alias Arnold Thompson, alias Fritz or Fritzchen, alias Agent Zigzag. Hello, darlings. This is Spies and Ties, a series of World War II in real time, and I'm Astrid Deinhard. So, the day of the invasion has changed everything. The Nazis desperately search for all sorts of ideas and initiatives to prevent the worst. Some high brains in the German Abwehr, now commanded by the SS, want to deposit their favorite agent Fritz behind the Allied lines in the bridgehead on the Norman coast, where he is to disguise himself as a priest to find out the radio code used by the ships to coordinate the shelling of coastal towns in support of the land forces. What a great idea. Well, even the Nazis forget about the plan very quickly because womaniser Eddie Chapman, for once, doesn't make a very good believable priest, and second, well, it's a bad idea on so many levels. So, they come up with another brilliant idea for their agent. We will drop you off over Britain so you can steal the device that makes the Brits capable of locating German U-boats. Piece of cake, right? Okay, let me explain. During the first 3 years of the war, German U-boats ravaged Allied shipping with brutal success. Recently, the balance has altered and German U-boats are being attacked and sunk at an alarming rate. The Germans don't know that their Enigma code has been broken and suspect some sophisticated submarine detection system that enables Allied surface ships to find U-boats to take action, evasive or aggressive. So listen, Fritz. Break in, identify the detector, find out how it works, take a photo, steal it if possible, and then bring it back to Germany, huh? To prepare for this mission, you shall go to Trondheim, Norway, and learn about the deepest secrets of German underwater war. How does that sound? Well, that sounds just great for a double agent, right? So he's brought to Norway, where he meets up with marine Abwehr experts who, despite being very suspicious of Eddie, tell of how they have come to the idea that the Brits might have some parabolic reflector with a rebounding ray to pick up the submarines. The device must be so sensitive it could detect a U-boat lying on the seabed with engines off. Can you believe that? So clearly, the British must have some X-ray apparatus of some sort. Also, they suspect that the detonators on British depth charges now have an inbuilt device to measure the distance from the target and explode with maximum devastation. So, where do I look? I have no clue where to go, says Eddie with grace. The officers have no clue either, but think that an engineering depot in Kensington might be making it. And Mr. Gröning, Eddie's German handler, continues. And when you have done that, find out where our Vergeltungswaffen crashed down in London and tell us how many Brits we killed and what kind of effect it has on the public. Gröning offers a small fortune in pay, but Eddie isn't a taker. Gröning doubles the sum. It's a deal. And Eddie signs a contract at the dotted line. Now, the Germans have put all their hopes on the Vergeltungswaffen at the moment, the V-1 cruise missile, and they are bad. At first, the flying bombs come in ones or twos, then in swarms. On June 15th, 217 V-1 missiles hammer into Britain, with 45 dropping on central London. The V-1s are hard to shoot down at first and spread fear and uncertainty to civilian life. People on the ground stop to listen anxiously to the engine overhead, waiting for the sudden silence. The Brits, with their dark humor, call them Doodlebugs. MI5 is desperately looking for a plan to counter the threat. All their present double agents had concentrated on Operation Fortitude, and John Cecil Masterman, Tal Robertson, and Churchill discuss what to do. And whom do they think of? Yes, you're right. They think of Zigzag, one of their favorite double agents. Unfortunately, they don't know where Eddie is at the moment. He simply vanished a few months ago. Which brings us back to the flight of our odd couple in the Junker towards Britain, right? As Zigzag and Pilot approach the island, they come under heavy attack from night fighters and anti-aircraft batteries. The engines scream as the pilot takes evasive action, spiraling up to 4,000 feet and then plunging back down. Eddie's stomach rebels with every twist. A flak thuds into the plane's tail just as Eddie tries to jump out. His parachute line hooks get tangled in the damaged tail, leaving Chapman dangled helplessly in the air. The co-pilot squeezes out Folio's seat and gives him a violent kick, sending Eddie tumbling into the darkness. Buffeted by a strong wind, he desperately tries to cling on to the large suitcase filled with radio and photographic equipment. Okay, this time Eddie is certain to die. His life flashes before his eyes like a rapid film. All the wonderful women he had met. Betty, the farm girl from Shropshire, and Freda and his little daughter he hardly saw. His last lover, fellow agent Dagmar, from Eidsvoll, north of Oslo. His family from Berwick-on-Tweed. His time as a guardsman in London, when he got screamed at by his sergeant. Eddie grins while still falling from the sky. "You constipated blankety blank crap. Do that again or I will ram this bloody rifle up your..." His prison time in Jersey, reading all 200 books of the prison library, the Romanville camp. And then Betty again. He's training as an agent in France by the Germans. Oberleutnant Fritz Graumann, number V6523. That's me, my German name and passport. I got an Iron Cross from the Nazis, but I work for the Double Cross in Britain. Eddie smiles even more. Tar Robertson, what a great guy, and Freda and my daughter. Tar will take care of you. And Dagmar again, and Betty again. Oh, Betty, forgive me for jumping out of the window. The last thing Eddie sees in front of him is the face of his German handler Stefan von Gröning, his dear, forbidden friend. Then his parachute opens with a bang. He's close to the ground. Bang, bang. He lands near, crashes into a high hedge, but no, lands hard on a country road between Cambridge and Newmarket. Knocked out. Not dead, but unconscious. With all of his luggage spread around him, his parachute tangled in the hedge, a lot of pain and a lot of puke all over him. There you go, Eddie. When he wakes up and can manage to move some of his bruised bones, he hides all his stuff under the hedge and hobbles away to find a phone booth and call Ronnie Reed, his British handler. Hi, it's Eddie. 2 hours later, Eddie finds himself back in Camp 020 with Tin-Eyed Stevens, who stares at him while Eddie tells what happened to him while away and what a great time he had in Norway working for the Germans. Stevens doesn't like him, a spy, a crook, and a moral degenerate, yet he is impressed, even moved by this strange young man in his 20s. He writes in his report, "The courageous, unscrupulous Chapman has satisfied his no less unscrupulous German clients, survived who knows how many tests, apparently able to match their best drinkers without giving the show away. We can trust him." Next morning, Eddie meets up with Tao Robertson and the XX team and Ronnie Reed and gives a professional situation report. For the second time in his life, he unburdens himself to his British spy master, a detailed, precise, minutely memorized dossier of a trained agent. He hands over an undeveloped film with photos of senior Abwehr officials, a scrap of rice paper on which he has noted the code word used by Oslo for radio traffic, Pressemontag Els Trondheim Swain, and the various crystal frequencies. June 30th. 2 days after his hard landing, Chapman sends his first radio message to von Gröning, while Reed looks on approvingly. Hard landing, but all okay. Finding better place. Coming again Thursday. Dagmar. The Double Cross team, and please look at the video that I made about them, and Eddie sit down and make a plan how to fool the Germans into using wrong distance settings for their V-1s. A lot of math, angles, speed, height, weight, they work hard. Crack the numbers and manage to deceive the Germans. And the V-1s stop hitting central London, impacting instead in the countryside or the suburbs. Chapman's deception messages have survived only in fragments because MI5 destroyed them for obvious reasons. Directing bombs on your own suburb might go down wrong in those suburbs, right? Nevertheless, they do less damage in the less densely populated areas, and the psychological impact is, of course, lower. Most importantly, many thousands of lives are saved, as J.C. Masterman shows in his book published after the war. All thanks to Eddie. But let's get back to that sophisticated device that Eddie is to find, photograph and steal, so no more German U-boats can be spotted, right? He needs to do that. After all, he signed at the dotted line, and you better deliver when your cover depends on it. Other agents have already reported that the Kriegsmarine, alarmed by the rising U-boat toll, have come to fear some new magic weapon. It's not magic though, but as Ewan Montague of Naval Intelligence observes, increase in U-boat kills is due in parts to new devices, mostly the Mark 24 mine, and by intercepting and decoding U-boat signals using Ultra. However, if the Germans believe there is some other new and powerful underwater weapon, why not encourage them in that direction? So, MI5 come up with deception for Eddie, one that sticks as close to the truth as possible to be credible. The British Navy have recently been fitted with a device called Hedgehog, a rocket-propelled motor bomb that explodes on contact with a submarine. It's still largely unknown to German intelligence, so Mi-5 decides to fiddle around with the facts a bit. They increase range and explosive effect and give it a novel kind of proximity fuse which goes off on a near miss and remotely trigger other nearby depth charges to create a chain reaction of pressure bombs. That's what they come up with. It's all nonsense, but on paper it makes the humble hedgehog into a beast of terrifying ferocity that will hopefully further erode German U-boat morale and scare them from freely attacking convoys. Most importantly, if U-boat commanders now fear that the Royal Navy have a rocket-propelled device that could hunt them at the bottom of the sea, they stay nearer the surface. So, Eddie sends a message to the Germans with what he has now discovered, including that the top-secret manufacturing is done in St. Helens by the AC Cossa Company. So he's heading north to try to find and photograph, and if lucky, steal one of these sophisticated magic devices to change the war. Then, on September the 8th, Germany launches the first V-2 attacks against Paris and London. This is a different creature than its predecessor. The V-2 is an early ballistic missile driven by liquid oxygen and alcohol. With a range of 200 miles, it flies at 10 times the speed of a V-1 to deploy a ton of high explosive carried in its nose cone. In a single hit alone, on Woolworth department store in South London, 160 people are killed. But Chapman sends a message to the Germans downplaying the effects. Unfortunately, at this point, the free press of the Western Allies put a halt to Eddie's deception. So many press pictures are published of the strike zones that the Germans don't need Eddie's reports. But that doesn't mean Eddie is done. During his visit to the Luftwaffe headquarters in Berlin, Eddie had been shown bits and pieces of British night fighters' radar equipment with serial numbers. So he asked von Gröning to transmit a complete list of these serial numbers so that he can steal the correct device. And Gröning does. But what Eddie really does is to give a clear idea to the Air Ministry of exactly what the Germans have salvaged. But as the steam of the German war machine and the Vergeltungswaffe program begins running out, Eddie runs out of a German employer. The Abwehr is no more. Their leaders, Canaris and Oster, are in concentration camp. The new spy master, the SS, have bigger problems than the U-boat war. And soon his friend and handler von Gröning will sit in the ruins of his burned-out patrician townhouse in Bremen with nothing to eat or anything left of his former life as an aristocrat. But how does it end for Eddie then? He had a terrible British handler after his good friend Ronnie Reed was transferred to France. He loved Ronnie a lot. Eddie gave him his Iron Cross as a present before he left. His new handler, Michael Wright, was very different. Upper class, arrogant, manipulating, and overbearing. He despises Eddie. This criminal should have no place in MI5. He follows him everywhere, into every corner of black marketeering, Soho bars and betting parlor, to get enough material together to denounce him and ruin his reputation. And he is successful. Masterman and Tal Robertson finally let Eddie go without a thank you or even a penny for his future. But not to worry. Eddie did not care much about that. He felt free at last. He went back to being what he was before the war. before he was a spy for Germany and Britain. A gentleman gangster with good style, deep work ethics, loyalty towards everyone he thought worth of earning it, no matter on which side they were on. He hired a detective to find Betty. And believe it or not, then found her by chance after 7 years in a cafe himself. He ran to her table, taking her hand. "I told you I would always come back to you," with a big grin on his face. Can you imagine her face? They got married, had a daughter, Susanne, and his dear friend, his German handler von Gröning, eventually came to her wedding. Betty and Eddie were for good this time. They stayed together until death did them part, when he died at the age of 83 in 1997. Eddie made a lot of money at the dog races, never hurt a single person, bought a castle in Ireland, took care of most of his former girlfriends. I have read a lot of books, my darlings, about Eddie Chapman for this, like Zigzag by Ben McIntyre, a fantastic author, who has already been my inspiration when I wrote my episode about the double cross team. It will be here somewhere any minute now. And the same title, Zigzag by Nicholas Booth, or Frank Owen's The Eddie Chapman Story, and Ethan Quinn's The Iron Spy. And so I would like to end my episode with the beginning of Ethan's book about Eddie, quoting Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who once said, "The line dividing good and evil cuts through the heart of every human being." So, if you are interested in this fascinating character, read up on him. I would just love to make a movie about him. You know, a guy like Arthur from Peaky Blinders would just be perfect for the part. He looks just like him. So, bye-bye, darlings. I'm looking forward to seeing you next time.